Hello and welcome guys, it's time for the set review. This will be the first of 6 set review videos. I will do one for each faction and one for all the multi-faction cards and go over the set card by card and talk about the applications in constructed and limited, mainly draft. Alright, so let's get started. This is just a factionless card and usually included with each set, so with each color if you filter them, so I might as well review it. This is basically just gets you a sigil of a faction of your choice. So if your deck needs some color stability, if you're playing 3 or more colors for example, and your deck is a bit slower, for example, has few or no 1 power cards, then this is a pretty good addition. It is also even better in limited than in constructed usually, I think, because your deck will have less 1 mana cards often in draft and might also benefit more from the mana fixing, from the from the faction fixing, simply because you have less dual lands, dual sigils, or whatever you want to call them, thrones and banners. So that's a pretty good card. Then we have the more or less manland of the fire faction. It turns into a 4/1 charge once you hit 4 or more influence. 4 or more power, not influence, sorry. I think this is one of the worst manlands, simply because it's a 4/1, so trades with anything, has no evasion, has no overwhelm. So yeah, I think this land is kind of underwhelming. You might still end up playing it in some decks because it's better than having a fire sigil in your deck still, but then again the more aggressive fire decks usually would be hurt a lot by it being depleted when you play it, so a simple fire sigil could still be better in an aggressive fire deck, simply because it allows you to play your 1-drops early and curve out smoothly while this harms you from curving out. Next we have Charchain Flail. This is basically just a relic weapon. It's kind of a worse version of Flame Blast, unless your opponent has no creatures and you get more than 1 hit in. But all in all, this card is pretty bad in my opinion. There's the 4 mana 4/1. This is basically a slightly better version of it. It's fine and limited, like you should pick it up. It's a decent removal spell, but it's not a great card, and I don't see it making it into a constructed deck anytime soon. This is a pretty decent card. We all know how good fireball type effects are in Magic Limited. The same goes for this card in Eternal. It's also pretty good and constructed. The Fire Shadow, the Stone Scar burn decks usually play 3 to 4. It's a bit restrictive, costing triple fire influence, having a threshold of triple fire influence. Sorry, I need to get used a bit to the lingo of Eternal compared to Magic. But yeah, triple fire influence can be pretty restrictive, and you can only use it usually on turn 2 or 3, sometimes on 2, if you can cheat that extra influence in there somehow, but usually you can't cast it before turn 3, and you also cannot control the X. It will simply use all the mana you have, all the power you have left, so you can't use some of your power and keep some for a fast spell on your opponent's turn or stuff like that. But yeah, it's a pretty good card and it's a staple in draft. This card is pretty weird. There's no use for it that I know of right now. It's basically unplayable in limited. It's kind of like a Lotus Petal basically, but as we all know from Magic, stuff that cheats on mana, or in this case on power, can be very powerful. so keep an eye on this card. While the game progresses, there might be some potential for a combo deck or something that wants to cheat something into play earlier or stuff like that. So it might be capable of doing something powerful and constructed down the road, but right now the card is basically not relevant. This is just a pretty weak 1-drop, nothing special here. It's neither good in constructed nor in limited, just a 1/1 for 1 that deals 1 damage to the enemy player. It's just not exciting. If it would deal damage rather than damage to the enemy player, so also could damage a creature, then it would be stellar, but the way it is, not very exciting. This is another pretty sweet 1-drop. This one is actually pretty sweet. There's a lot of good 1-drops among some of the colors, the factions, sorry, and giving all of them charge and having charge itself can be pretty sweet, as can be seen by a bunch of multi-faction Jiddo decks that are out there. I myself brewed one with this guy in closed beta. Mine was Stone Scar, as are some of the decks out there. They are either usually Stone Scar or some of them are Praxis, Time, Fire. But yeah, Shadow has a lot of good 1-drops, so it goes really well with this guy. This is another 1-drop staple of Fire. Really good with token strategies like the Fire Time or Fire Time Primal token style decks. It's also pretty good in aggro decks because it's really good against control-ish decks that have few blockers and rely on removal, because having to kill 2 1/1s is can be really annoying, especially since there's not that many sweeper effects in the game right now. So really good card in limited and in constructed. This card is kind of so-so in my opinion. It's probably not that great in constructed, giving only 1 toughness or health or whatever it's called. Is not that great. Aura type effects are better in this game than they are in Magic, partially because you can't respond to them. Like if you play a weapon on a unit, your opponent cannot kill it in response. You can only do it afterwards at the beginning of combat, for example. This card is probably okay-ish in limited, but should usually not end up in your constructed deck. It is pretty efficient for its cost, but adding only 1 health usually makes your creature still trade with a lot of stuff, and then you lose 2 cards for 1 of their cards, which is not very good. Yeah, this is kind of a mechanic that we know from Hearthstone, putting stuff in your opponent's deck, and it's not very good, especially not in a game with 75 card decks usually. It might seem a bit better in limited, because then you at least get more than 10% of the opponent's deck being firebombs, but still it's about 10% of the opponent's deck being firebombs, so on average the opponent takes 0.5 damage per draw step, with a chance to get lucky. But yeah, it's just not worth the investment of a card. I don't know of any good constructed applications for this card, and it's also not much better in limited either. Don't put this into your deck. Maybe pick it because it's a legendary, some good dust, Shiftstone, but don't play it. Oni Ronin, really good 1-drop. Sees a decent amount of play in constructed. 1 mana, 1 power, 2 strengths, and Warcry is pretty decent. Sure, it often trades, but then it's still trading 1 for 1, might even trade against a 2 power unit of the opponent. So you trade 1 of your power investments for 2 power investment on their side and get the Warcry trigger, which is really nice. In limited, this is a staple. It's a really great 1-drop in draft. Make sure to pick those up. They are fairly high picks if you're in an aggressive fire-based deck. just all around a pretty good card for the fire faction in both formats. Next we have the Pyro Knight, another constructed and limited staple, basically the same as the Oni Ronin, except we get Overwhelm instead of Warcry, which is worse initially, but later on this guy turns into a 6/5 Overwhelm, which is great, so it's a lot better long term than the Oni Ronin and a much better top deck. This is a limited staple and also really great and aggressive constructed fire-based decks, like the Stone Scar Burn deck usually plays 3 or 4 of those guys. This card is basically just a sideboard card. I don't see putting this into any main deck, be it limited or constructed. So keep this in mind for your sideboards in constructed tournaments, or if they ever turn ranked into best of 3, but leave it out of your main decks, is my opinion. Ruthless Stranger, another 1 mana 2/1 with potential upside. Keep in mind it also enhances your opponent's strangers in limited, like if they play some of the factionless strangers to fix their mana, you might turn them into 3/2s accidentally, but it's still an okay 1-drop for an aggressive deck, and you might even have some more strangers to synergize with. Plus you could build like some cute multi-faction stranger deck and constructed, but these have proven not to be capable of competing with the top decks, so it's not a major archetype right now, but maybe we will get the tools later down the road to have a competitive stranger deck in the future. Next we have Temper, which is kind of an okay card, deals 1 damage and the next weapon or unit you draw gets +1/+1 basically. This card is okay. I can see putting it as a filler in my limited deck. You usually won't be running it in a constructed deck, I think, because it's just too low impact, but it can play a role in limited. It can finish off opposing units or kill small opposing units and give you some upside in addition. It's not terrible, but it's not great. Like if you're short on cards, I can see putting a copy of this into my fire-based limited deck. Next we have Ticking Grenadin. This can be situationally relevant in constructed because 1 mana 3 damage is a pretty good ratio. Basically, in limited, your deck usually won't be focused enough for this card to be worth it, so it's usually just a bad 1-drop in limited. But in constructed, if your deck is basically a burn type strategy, then this card might be worth it. Like if you're playing like a mono fire, building like a mono fire burn aggro deck, this card is pretty decent. Torch, we all know and love Lightning Bolt from Magic. This card is no different. 1 power, 3 damage to wherever you please at instant speed is just as stellar as you would think it is in about any game. So this card is just one of the top fire faction cards, basically. Next we have Warhelm. This is again a bit of a so-so card. The problem is it gives no health. It gives Warcry and Charge, which is decent if you have some cards that really benefit from gaining Charge, and maybe some units that have evasion like Unblockable or Flying, then this might be decent in your deck. Or like creatures that are beefy enough, have enough health themselves and benefit from getting Charge and Warcry. This might be okay in limited. I think in constructed, I don't know, I toyed around with it in closed beta for like hyper aggressive decks and stuff, like red-green weapon hyper aggressive style decks, but all in all it's questionable how playable the card is in constructed. I'm not that sold. Card is just kind of low impact for the investment of a card. Next we have Bladekin Apprentice. This, in my opinion, is actually a pretty decent 2-drop. Doesn't see that much play right now, because once you are multi-faction, you have so many good 2-drops often that this one just falls short. But all in all, this is basically a 2-1 quick draw. The first turn it attacks, and then keeps growing and becomes increasingly harder to stop outside of removal. And if you enhance it with weapons and stuff, or have combat tricks, makes it even harder. This basically works a bit like the Slith Firewalker in Magic, which arguably was worse because it needed to damage the opponent to grow. This one grows before it damages, so it automatically grows once each turn. And a 2-1 quick draw for 2 is not too shabby to begin with the potential to grow into a bigger threat. So in limited, definitely a great 2-drop. In constructed, depends on what your alternatives are, I would say, and what the strategy of your deck is. Next we have Brazen Daredevil. It's a 2-mana, a 2-power 1-1 with Reckless, and it deals damage equal to her attack to a random enemy, means the opponent or the units. This card is pretty bad in my opinion, because you need to enhance her to not die in combat and to deal a reasonable amount of damage. And you cannot control where the damage goes. It might go on that blocker that you don't want to block her, might go to the opponent's face, and your Daredevil just dies because she has Reckless and stuff. It's not a good card, usually neither in limited nor in constructed. Just don't put this into your deck. It's a trap. Random effect cards and Reckless on low stat, no evasion creatures don't pair well. Next we have Caleb's Favor, a pretty decent sigil fixer in fire, basically dealing 2 to the opponent and replacing itself with a sigil. This is basically better than the Monument in red, because dealing 2 and getting a sigil for 2 is arguably better than gaining a depleted sigil or a 4-1 charge for 5. So this is a pretty good card in limited and constructed. Most aggressive burn style constructed decks play 3 or 4 of these, and in limited, having sigils that are not only sigils but have another effect is always welcome. There we have another like underpowered 2-drop. It's a 2-1 charge. One health is not very good usually. There's too many random 1/1s and free effects that deal 1 damage or give -1/-1 and stuff like that. So this card's pretty lackluster, dies to anything in combat. Just not a good card, neither in limited nor constructed. Don't play this. Ornate Katana. This is a pretty decent weapon. Like I said, units cannot be killed in response to equipping them with the weapon, so you always get to draw a card. So even if the opponent plays a removal on the unit, you don't get 2 for 1, you only get 1 for 1 because the katana replaces itself. And if you have quick draw or high defense, if you're like in Fire Justice for example, make this a really nice card replacing itself. It's a great limited card and a pretty solid constructed card still. Okay, next we have Piercing Shot. This is a great limited card, and in constructed more of a sideboard card, because 2 damage might not kill anything against some decks, and there might also be decks that don't have any targets for it, so it sits in your hand. But it's a great sideboard card, usually if you're playing with sideboard, and it's a really nice pickup for your limited deck, because it provides a huge tempo swing, blowing off their early drop, dealing them some damage and getting in for an attack that they might not have expected. Pyre Adept, another pretty weak 2-drop. Instead of charge we have 3 attack here. Not great in limited or in constructed. Just basically a filler for the faction. Nothing you normally want to put in your deck unless you have to. If you're short on 2-drops in limited, feel free to put this in your deck. I think it's better than the 2-1 charge, but still pretty bad. 1 health, like I said, is very lackluster in the game. Next we have one of the premier 2-drops in Fire, Warcry and Quick Draw with 2/2 stats. Comparing that to the 2-1 charge for 2 mana makes very clear why the 2-1 charge is so bad. This card is very stellar, and you can also protect it with pump effects like this, enhance it with weapons to make it even harder to block, get your Warcry trigger every turn. This is the premier 2-drop in Fire. Really good card, staple and limited, and a solid constructed card. Next we have Overwhelm, +3/+1 and Overwhelm. It's a fast spell. It's not that great, but it is playable in limited, and I think I've seen it in constructed. Not sure if but I think none of the top decks, the very competitive decks, plays it, because 2 mana for only 1 health makes your guy still die a lot of the time in combat, makes it harder to protect it from damage spells and stuff. But yeah, in limited the card can play a role in a very aggressive deck. See, pairing it with a Rakano Outlaw, for example, is pretty good. Next we have Song of War. I think this card is basically just useless. Giving Warcry to all of your units is not worth the investment of a card or 2 power. It's basically a win more. You already would need to have a bunch of creatures in play and them being capable of attacking into the opponent's creatures' units without being a disaster. So all in all, this card's pretty bad in any format. Next we have Assembly Line. That's a pretty good card. We all know Hordeling Outburst from Magic. This is a 1 fire influence 3/1/1 token thing for 3. That's pretty great. It's great if you have ways to make them bigger with various pump effects, but even if not, it's still pretty solid, and it's a pain for control decks that rely on spot removal. It's a great limited card and a solid constructed card if your deck has ways to utilize the small bodies, like with the Obelisk in Time, or with the 4-drop +1/+0, I think, Quick Draw Stone Scar card, for example. Can't remember the name. All in all, if your deck can take advantage of it, great constructed card, and in limited, generally a very solid card. Next we have Sensari Brigand. Not a great card in either format in my opinion. 2/2 charge makes it hard to connect if your opponent has any units that are not exhausted. Double damage only to players makes it basically a 4/2 if the opponent has no blocker, and a 2/2 if they have a blocker, and it has double fire influence threshold. Not a great card. Neither in limited nor in constructed. If you can afford not to put it into your limited deck, don't. Next we have Granite Acolyte, a really great limited card. 3 mana 2/1, a 3 power 2/1 that gives a permanent +2/+0 to a unit of your choice, including itself. So it's either a 3 mana 4/1, which is okay, or enhances your best creature, making the +2/+0 basically have immediate impact. So it's like 2 attack into play and 2 attack with charge on some other guy. It's really great. Can even be considered in a weapon-centric constructed deck, because it's just a pretty good utility for the cost and the card investment. Next we have Oni Quartermaster. When you play a weapon, draw a card. It's a bit situational because 3 power for 2/2 and no other impact, and basically being a poor attacker makes this sort of a vulnerable attachment, but it can pay off. There's a lot of cheap weapons. If you have enough weapons and have some room in your deck, might be decent in limited. Probably won't make it in your constructed deck, but never say never. Card has some interesting unique applications that might make it at least interesting. Next we have Recano Flagbearer. That card's basically useless. 3 power 1/1. It will never attack because your opponent should always have something that stops it, making the 2 Warcry a one-time deal. And that's just bad for the investment of a card. Sure, even if you give it Invasion, just for gaining the 2 Warcry is not worth the hassle in my opinion. That card is just not good in either format. If you really need an extra card for your limited deck and have ways to give this evasion, maybe, but even then I'm not happy to put this in any deck. Next we have Rally. This in my opinion is usually not that great either. In Constructed you should usually have better ways to make your swarm of little guys better, and in Limited you might have a hyper aggressive deck that pumps out small guys, lots of 1-drops, assembly line and stuff, grenade and drone. Then maybe you want to put 1 or 2 of these in your deck, but all in all this will be benched more often than not. Next we have Rebel Sharpshooter. Not a constructed card, but a pretty decent limited card. 3/3 for 3, with upside pretty decent. With Warcry it can easily become a 4/4 or 5/5 with quick draw, and there's plenty of other ways to make it 4 attack or higher to activate the quick draw, and quick draw is really annoying when you're on the defense against a higher power quick draw unit and have no removal to stop it, because it's really hard to block these. So a pretty solid limited card, but not a constructed card. Next we have Shogun Scepter. This is a pretty good weapon actually. Gives +2/+1. Gives Warcry to the unit it's attached to, and gives you an Oni Ronin in addition. So it's basically 4/2 in stats and double Warcry, which is pretty nice. So this is a pretty good card. It's a great card for limited, and it's even potentially viable for constructed in like Fire Justice weapon based aggro decks, for example, or in some 1-drop heavy deck with the charge giving Jiddo, because the Oni Ronin coming off of it will have charge and the weapon will have charge because you just put it on a unit that can already attack. So that's pretty nice. Next we have Burnout. This card used to cost 3 at some point in the beta. Now that it costs 4, it's not very great anymore. I liked to play this card a bunch as removal and finisher when it used to cost 3 in like token decks and throwaway style red-black like Stone Scar aggro decks. For 4 mana it's just too clunky, especially at the cost of having to sacrifice a guy. That also explains why I haven't seen the card around much anymore. It might still be okay in your limited deck if you have enough units that you can afford to throw away, because 5 damage is nothing to sneeze at. But in constructed this is way too clunky, and in limited it's very situational, but might make your deck depending on your deck. Next we have Centaur Outrider. Nothing to see here. 4 power, 5/2. Not a good card, trades with anything. Filler if you need another body or have ways to give it evasion. Might be okay, but all in all not a great card. Next we have Cloud of Ash. That's your typical Falter style effect. Costs 4 here, which makes it a lot more lackluster. 4 is a lot. But in limited this can be your game changer. If you're in a stall, you can play this and win the game. So it might be a decent one-off in a limited deck, and in constructed maybe a sideboard card. I don't see it in the main deck. In constructed there's too many decks where this card will basically be useless because they're not relying enough on units for this to be relevant. So you're wasting a card basically. But it is a good sideboard card against decks that get you in a stall often enough for an aggressive fire-based deck. Next we have Furnace Mage. It's basically a solid limited card. 4 mana 4/3. It's not great, but fine, given that it kills an enemy attachment if they have one, which they often will in limited. Makes it a very versatile card and a good way to have main deck attachment kill in your deck. And in constructed this is a great sideboard card. because getting a threat into play and killing an opposing key attachment is such a huge value and tempo gain that some opponents might not recover from it. So, good sideboard card for Constructed, very solid main deck pickup for Limited. Next we have Guerrilla Fighter, another card that probably won't make it in your Constructed deck because it's a bit too underpowered for Constructed, but in my opinion it's a pretty nice Limited card. 3/2 Warcry, pretty decent stats for 4, and basically shutting down the biggest blocker for the turn you play the Guerrilla Fighter is a pretty huge tempo swing for an aggressive deck trying to push through the last damage. So I usually like these in my fire Limited decks. Next we have the Magma Javelin that I talked about. Not an exciting card, no Constructed card, but an okay Limited weapon. Usually kills, is capable of killing a lot of annoying units, and maybe you get lucky and your opponent has no units and you get a free hit into their face. Feel free to pick those up and put them into your Limited deck. They will do their job consistently. They're nothing to be excited about, but a solid card. Next we have Morningstar, +3/+3 and Overwhelm. I personally think the card's not that great. 4 power is a lot for the stats. It's an okay Limited card, I would say, but should usually not make it into your Constructed deck. It's just, I don't know. Like if it was 3, I think it would be a solid Constructed card maybe, but 4 is just a lot for 3/3 and Overwhelm. Correct me if you think I'm wrong. Outland Sniper, another great Limited card. 4 power 2/2, deal 2 damage wherever you want. Pretty good stuff. Usually not good enough for Constructed though, I think. Just too low impact for the cost and the point in the game where you play it, but a great Limited card. Next we have Rebel Illuminator, 4 power 3/1, that gives you a lightning bolt, a torch when it dies. This is a great Limited card and even a decent Constructed card, especially in like a mono fire aggro deck type of deck. All in all, a really nice 2-for-1. Getting a torch and a 3 power body is no bad deal, and in Limited it's actually a great deal. Next we have 4 power 2/2 that gives you 2 1/1s when it dies. Not great, usually not a Constructed card. Also a mediocre Limited card. Can be an okay filler, but nothing that I'm super excited about to put in my deck. Next we have Steelfang Chakram, +4/+0 for 4, and when it dies you get it back to your hand. I think it might be an okay Limited card depending on your deck, but I think I usually don't want to put it in my Constructed deck. Maybe it's like a decent sideboard card against spot removal control decks with like tokens and stuff to make your threats really annoying and turn your tokens into like 5/1s and stuff. But all in all the card is really slow, really clunky and not that high impact. Very situational card. 3/2 charge and quick draw for 5. I'm personally not very excited about this card in either format. It's definitely not Constructed playable, but it's also not great in Limited in my opinion. Stats are just too low. You might not even benefit from the charge because you can't attack because the opponent has like a 4 health blocker, and then you just get like a 5 mana 3/2 quick draw. That's not great. Next we have Calaran Channeler. Basically 5 power 3/2 that deals damage to the opponent for each unit that you have. Not too great either. There's better things to do if you have a lot of units in play, and if you don't, it's just a very weak card. All in all, not great in either format. Then we have Centaur Raid Leader, 5 power 4/4. Double faction makes it a little more restrictive, but Great limited card in my opinion, usually not good enough for constructed, too unfocused and stuff, but having a 4/4 charge that gives your next unit that you draw a charge is pretty good, so I'm pretty happy to put this guy in my draft deck normally. Next we have Dust Hoof Brawler. It's a 5/3 for 5 with Overwhelm. Not great, but if you need a filler to fulfill out your curve and need another creature in your draft deck, it might be fine. Not a constructed card at all though. Flashfire. This card is a bit so-so, mostly because Obliterate exists, because on turn 5 this deals 5 without Overwhelm, while this deals 6 with Overwhelm. So basically you need to play 4 Obliterate in your deck before you put a single Flashfire in your deck, usually in constructed. But in limited, Flashfire is a great card. Usually it deals a fair amount of damage wherever you need to, so feel free to put these in your limited deck. It's a pretty good limited card. Next we have Infernus. This is basically a bad version of Flashfire and Obliterate, which can be free if you have it in your opening hand. It's a 5/5 Overwhelm charge that dies at the end of turn. If you're playing or trying to play a mono fire burn deck in constructed, you might give this a try, but all in all this card is pretty underwhelming in my opinion. Next we have Obliterate. Great limited and constructed card, like I said, 6 damage for 5 with Overwhelm, so that no damage goes to waste, is pretty great. Next we have Shogun of the Wastes. Deals double damage, 5 power 3/3. All your other units deal double damage. Once again, doesn't look too bad. I think it's a pretty good limited card, but in constructed you usually have better options than this guy. I tried it a bunch in my Fire Time token deck in closed beta, but mostly because I was lacking other cards, and this one was a rare back then I think, so I just was missing a more expensive better card. But yeah, it's a pretty solid limited card, I would say, because it might win the game for you the turn you play it. Next we have Soulfire Drake. 5 power 5/2 flying charge that gives all creatures in your deck either randomly flying or charge, which is pretty good because both effects are pretty nice. This is a pretty nice constructed card depending on your deck, like the Stone Scar burn decks usually play 1 or 2 of those, for example. And it's also a really great limited card. It's a limited bomb basically, so make sure to pick it up both for the Shift Stone and for the power it adds to your deck. Next we have Crowd Favorite. Not a constructed card in my opinion, but a pretty solid limited card. 6 power for 3/4 stats, and getting you the best weapon with cost 3 or less from your deck into play should usually mean this is like a 3/4 for 3 or 4 power that basically tutors you your best low cost weapon into play. So actually, if you have a bunch of nice weapons to find with this, this is a great limited card, but better not put it in your constructed deck. Once again, next card, Frontline Cyclops. 6 mana 6/6 Warcry Reckless. Not a great card, definitely not a constructed card, but a solid limited card, I would say. The stat to cost ratio is okay. You get Warcry on top of it, which probably won't be that high impact that stage of the game. Reckless could be a bit lackluster, but if you're fire, you're probably an aggressive deck. But then again, if you're an aggressive deck, 6 power is maybe a bit too high the curve. I'm a bit on the fence of the card. The stats and stuff are solid, but the card seems a bit confused for its faction and the role the faction usually plays, so I don't want to put this in my deck if I don't have to, basically. Next we have General Isalio. Limited bomb, basically. 6/4 quick draw that gives all your units +2 attack while it's in play. Double faction makes you have to be deeper in double fire threshold, makes you having to be a bit deeper into fire, not very splashable. And even in constructed I can see this card being situationally interesting, but not that great. For toughness makes it kind of vulnerable, and the effect disappearing when he dies. Also, you don't want this to be blown up mid-combat to mess up your combat mass, for example. But yeah, in limited it's a bomb. Hellfire Rifle, not a great weapon. 6 power for +3/+3 is very underwhelming. 3 damage to the enemy player. Not that relevant usually unless it kills them. I don't even like this card in limited much, to be honest, and in constructed it's terrible. Next we have Stone Scar Maul. 6 power for 6/3 Overwhelm is actually pretty decent. Weapon is a bit clunky, doesn't have that much armor, but dealing damage to the unit and the opponent's face at the same time is pretty nice. And sometimes you can kill like a small unit and deal like 4 or 5 damage to the opponent and still keep the weapon around, for example, which is pretty nice. It's a decent pickup for limited, I would say, but in constructed I think it usually won't be good enough to put in any deck. Wildfire Phoenix, another card that's probably irrelevant for constructed, but a staple in limited. 6 power, 5/5 flying is great, and the potential to come back around later to finish the job is really nice if the game goes long. So all in all, limited staple, constructed probably not a card. Next we have another clunky weapon, Claw of the First Dragon. 7 power is a lot, but +4/+4 and Entomb giving you 4 random 1-cost units. It's not too bad. Card is probably decent in limited, but I wouldn't say it's a bomb because 7 power is a lot. The effect is solid but not insane. I would expect a bit better for such a high cost card, I think. Next we have Steelbound Dragon, a 7/7 for 7 with flying and overwhelm. This once again is a decent limited card, not a constructed card at all. In limited, 7 power still is a lot, but if your deck is a slower fire deck that can live long enough for this card to be relevant, this is a pretty sweet way to finish the game if your deck needs a finisher and is more mid-rangey or controlling. But yeah, don't put this into your aggro deck, of course. Next we have Caleb, Uncrowned Prince. He's a 6/6 charge for 8. You have to be heavy fire in order to be able to support him. And the effect is pretty nice. You get a random weapon on each of your fire units, including himself. So the effect is really strong, but 8 power is a lot. And you need to have a couple units in play for him to be really powerful, like 1 or 2 at least. So yeah, once again a card that's really nice for a slow fire deck. If you're mid-range or control in limited, this is a great bomb, but in an aggro deck this card is just a blank. So situational bomb. If you pick this up early, you can try and build your deck around him winning you the game, for example. Last card in fire is Lava Blood Goliath. Gets even more expensive. 9 power for 6/6 overwhelm. And it deals damage equal to its attack somewhere when you play it. So basically it's a 9 power 6/6 that usually deals 6 damage to wherever you want, which is a good effect, but 9 power is so much that I don't even see that many limited decks that really want it. But if you think you can consistently drag out the game long enough, the effect is pretty strong and might swing the game in your favor, but 9 power is very restrictive. Alright, that's it for fire this time. As you can see, fire is a lot like red in Magic. Lots of burn, aggressive creatures, couple combat tricks and creature enhancements. Like all factions in Eternal, they all go up to like 8 or 9 cost for at least 1 or 2 cards. So there's potential for some slower decks in Limited in these colors, but the tendency clearly is to push for damage and finish them off with burn, as we know from Magic in red. And yeah, I hope you like my review of the cards for Limited and Constructed. If you disagree with some of my assessments on some of the cards, feel free to discuss it in the comments, let me know. I'm always open to alternative opinions and really like strategy and evaluation discussions for games like this, so fire away. If you liked the review, feel free to like, subscribe and share. I'm just getting started with my Eternal content and appreciate all the help I can get to reach more people with it. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye!